how we got used to the game. So I'm going to throw up maybe a little League of Legends, not League of Legends, Runeterra talkie up on the scene. But for now, we'll just keep going. So how did you learn about Runeterra? Like, how did you start?
So uh, I used to be I don't know if you know you know the card game Force Will. I don't know how many other people know the card game Force Will, but I used to be the judge director or the director for the World Judge Program for that
Mm-hmm.
game, and so I know a ton of people worldwide from that game specifically, and both in the United or North America and Europe, a lot of the players from that game were also getting into Runeterra, and they suggested it to me. Now, a lot of them are also League fans, so a lot of it was,
Yeah,
the
it's
Riot
combinational.
connection.
It's like when Riot previewed all those games, like the fighting game, the shooter, Valorant. Like, it's to build that Riot brand.
Exactly, yeah. And my friend Ryan, he told me he's actually the current world champion for Force Will. He
Mm-hmm.
told me that the game is honestly the best game he's ever played in terms of card games. He's played a lot of card games.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be big in Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day. Um, and so I was like, well, okay, I'll try it because I'm getting recommendations from him, getting recommendations from some of the best players in Europe. And Yeah, ever since I picked up the game, it's amazing. I mean,
Oh,
it's very different than a lot of other card games,
yeah.
especially with like alternated attacks stuff like that. But in
Oh,
terms of just mechanics, I mean, the core mechanics are so good. And while the meta right now is kind of not the greatest,
mm-hmm.
to put it lightly, the mechanic, the core of the game is so good that it's like if they fix the meta, which they can because it's an online card game, um, you always know the game's going to be good again, even if the meta's really just unplayable, which it's not right now. It's
So
not
you got
unplayable.
in. You got in via recommendations, basically.
Yeah, and I started playing from the very beginning of beta in
Okay.
February.
So it's so just immediately you kind of instantly picked it up and you're like, this is good. Even through recommendations, this is good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you? Ooh, my mic was kind of freaking out there. Did you ever play any other like online card game before, like Hearthstone or anything like that?
No, this is my first online CCG. I've played a lot of paper card games. I played Yu-Gi-Oh way back in the day. I played Magic, both standard and modern. I've played Pokemon trading card game. Obviously, I've played Force of Will. I've played, most of the bigger games at one point or another. I've tried Vanguard and Weiss Schwartz as well. So I've played a lot of paper games, and most of the big ones competitively at some point or another. But this was my first online card game experience.
Gotcha. Well, it's funny. Like for me, I'm actually pretty used to online card games because there are some that I played quite a lot. Actually, there was one 2D bit game that actually recently shut down. I'm very disappointed about. And I'll see if I can pull it up the name here. But another game I used to play a ton of was Ferraria, and I actually really liked Faria. I think that's how you pronounced it. The point was, it was a really cool, interesting game that actually had some pretty neat mechanics, but it was online. And while Hearthstone was my first one, it kind of pushed me in the direction of trying online card games as a medium, like as a whole. So I started picking up,
Hmm.
I started trying other games. I started saying, okay, if Hearthstone can be this good, what about other ones, you know?
Yeah, I mean, have a I have a friend who's played like every card game that's come out in the last like 10 years.
Oh, like everyone.
Every single one, yeah. And I know that he used to really like Artifact, and I think Artifact
Oh
just
my
came out with a
god,
new
don't.
version of it too.
Let's not talk about Artifact. Artifact
Okay, we
is.
won't talk about Artifact,
Well, no, I mean,
but
if we want to have the talk about Artifact, like, I can have that talk. I'm in the Artifact 2.0 beta right now, and I still don't like it.
oh, that's fair enough.
Like,
Yeah,
I was one of the guys that actually spent a lot of money trying to make Artifact into a thing. because I was like, okay, I really like Dota. I loved Dota at the time. And I thought I thought my skills in Magic and my knowledge of Dota could kind of translate over, but it didn't. And it kind of ended poorly. But again, at the time, I had other options too. So I had Faria, I had, Hearthstone. Oh, and I found the game. I did a quick Google search. The name of the game was Duelist. So Duelyst. And the game was fantastic. Excellent, excellent game. Great graphics, some really deep depth. But they messed with the core mechanics of the game and changed how turn order works, how the mana system worked. And I kind of dropped it after that because I felt like all the decks and all the cards I had learned how to play were kind of moot. From what I heard, it actually balanced itself pretty decently afterwards. But at that point, I kind of felt like they were doing a similar situation with most anime card games, I hate to say, where they were releasing too many expansions that kind of made the game lose its basics, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. I mean, I've people always talk about Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Every time a set comes out, it like completely changes the meta, and it's a completely different game.
Oh my god, the stuff with Lynx and the new Seven Road stuff, like, don't get me wrong, I follow it because some of it is actually really interesting, and I actually really like some of the card design in terms of their own game. But it gets to be much. Like, before it's like, play this, attack. And now it's like, Link summon this 5-star rank 4 synchro. It becomes gibberish to a new player.
Well, yeah, that's when synchros came out originally, and it just started becoming these big OTK decks because you just, that's basically what it was. You just were able to play things like 3 or 4 monsters in a turn and get like.
Yu-Gi-Oh literally invented OTK with Exodia.
Well, that's true. I mean, OTK's been in it since the beginning, but they did balance it for a long time before they actually had synchros. But then ever since synchros, it's basically been more of a combo game. I'll
tell you the story of my first ever Yu-Gi-Oh tournament another day. But for now, I think people want to hear less about Yu-Gi-Oh and more about Runeterra. Because believe me, if we're going to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh, I need like at least another like Yu-Gi-Oh player in here, like someone who is actively playing.
That's for sure. Yeah.
It'd be like trying to shit on sports and not having a guy who actually knows the sports to argue about it. Otherwise, I'd be here being like, yes, so the ball creates touchdowns. What?
Fair, I suppose. Okay, yeah, that's no problem. I was just more saying that, like, I understand the idea of a game constantly changing, like either with each set or with each new mechanic, it just becomes a completely different card game.
Yeah, and I think that actually leads into our Runeterra discussion. I hate to say it, is Runeterra, I feel like, is kind of going through this transformation even right now, with the introduction of the new characters, with the introduction of the new faction Bilgewater, with the introduction potentially of, I hate to say it, another faction in August, which could create either the same issues we're having now or completely change everything we're talking about. Like, and it has happened before with other card games. Whenever something brand new comes out, besides just expanding previous factions, cards that were bad suddenly become insanely amazing busted.
It's the nice thing with
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, at least the nice thing with Runeterra is that maybe just with all online card games, but the fact that you usually just accumulate these bad cards, like unplayable cards at the time, just from having these weekly vaults and whatever. And so the nice thing at least is that if something comes out that does make an older card all of a sudden insane, it's not like a paper card game where all of a sudden it's so expensive you can't get it. You probably already have a set in your collection.
Well, that's why I like the 2-week system that Hearthstone created personally. Hearthstone. Riot kind of promised us, which is, hey, we get it. We're going to constantly update our cards. We understand that some cards will be busted and they're not going to be fun. You're not going to run into a situation like with what happened with, like I said, Hearthstone, where some cards were left unchanged for like months. I remember personally being so frustrated at the I can't even remember the card, but it just having my phone or my desktop blow up with "Get it, everyone, get in here! Everyone, get in here! Everyone, get in here!" Like it was the worst. And I think that's the card now I remember was called Grim Patron, and everybody played the deck. Or Shutterwalk when everybody was playing Shaman Shutterwalk, and the game would just lock at 50 minutes of cool. So I'm just gonna surrender. It's not even fun.
Yeah, that's the nice thing. Even in this kind of worse meta, we've never actually had a meta where there's only been one playable deck. There was the closest thing we've ever had was in the beta season. We had a deck with it was Shadow Isles, and it was just Shadow Isles, and then you might put in like 2 denies, or you might put in like
No, I'm
2
well.
cards from a.
If we're talking about like the meta previously, I hate to say it, but the meta before, Runeterra has kind of had 2 eras: the era of pre-deny nerf and the era of the deny nerf.
That's fair too. Yeah, I will say though that the deny nerf did not affect the card as much as people think. I mean, the deny at 4 mana is still perfectly playable. And most of the time, the things you want to deny are things relatively later game.
But people aren't splashing into it.
Yeah, it just stopped deny from going into aggro decks. And the thing is, like, when you have a cancel spell, cancel counter spell, whatever, going into aggro decks, you have a problem. It's like when, well, I mean, this is a Magic reference, but it's like when Treasure Cruise was going into burn.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, deny should never be in an aggro.
You have to separate those deck types. Otherwise, you run into issues where they have an answer to everything.
Yeah, and I think you see that to some degree with Will of Ionia, to be honest, where I know Swim's talked about that he thinks this is like the worst card in Runeterra in terms of game design, but it's just the card's so versatile that you can put it in any deck. You can put it in aggro, you can put it in mid-range, you can put it in control, and it has a purpose in all 3 of those decks, because in aggro, you're bouncing something so that you can get damage through, because they can't play any big dudes because you can just bounce them. And control, obviously, it's just to buy time until you get to late game, and then mid-range, it can pretty much do either, depending on how you're playing your deck. So having a card that's that universal is usually an issue, and so I am glad that they did nerf deny, but it still goes in pretty much everything.
Now, if we look at, I'm gonna pull up a screen on my side here of the current Runeterra meta, just from analytic perspectives.
Sure.
But the one thing that definitely has kind of popped its head up a little bit has been and you actually mentioned this earlier when we were has been the rise of Darius.
Oh God, yeah.
So tell me more about Darius, please. Go into discussion.
So Darius, for the longest time of this game's existence, was actually 1 less health on his backside. He went from being a 6/5 overwhelmed to a 10/5 overwhelmed when your opponent had 10 or less life. In the most recent patch, when they buffed, I don't say the most recent patch because they had a kind of half patch, but the most recent full patch that they had, they buffed him from a 10/5 to a 10/6 on the backside. That's actually a very big deal, because there's a lot of 5 attack cards that could trade with him, and then he'd get in 1 attack that maybe did 5 damage, and then that was it, and he died. And sometimes that was enough to kill, sometimes it wasn't. But now that he's a 10/6, it's much easier to have him live through combat. So people are now playing Darius with Shadow Isles, and they're playing him with either Atrocity or Harrowing or both. And Darius with Atrocity is just stupid, because if your opponent's at 10 or less life and he's a 10/6 when you play him, Atrocity just kills them. And it's as I said, it's very hard to actually do 6 damage, especially at instant speed. So if you do have 12 mana, you can just play him and kill them instantly.
Are we getting to the point where Atrocity might be better as a slow rather than a fast card?
I think so, but if you put Atrocity at slow, it wouldn't be played at all. And that's the real concern with certain cards. Like Unyielding Spirit, when they changed that from burst to fast, it made Unyielding Spirit no longer, and I tweeted about this too, but it made Unyielding Spirit no longer like a combo card, because you couldn't just throw it into Demacia deck and be like, oh, I win because you don't have Will of Ionia or it's not Pacify, sorry, it's Purify for something that's not a champion.
So is that not even a case potentially of speed, but more of a case of just like cost? Like potentially, would have been better to say, okay, cool, don't change it from instant to fast, or I guess to slow or whatever. Just up the cost, make it like 12 or 10 or anything like that. Would that still make it unplayable?
Well, 10 would make it unplayable for Atrocity specifically.
No, I mean for cards like Unyielding Spirit and such. Like,
oh no, and Unyielding Spirit. What I was going to make the counterpoint was that Unyielding Spirit's still playable. People still play it as a one of in Fiora decks. People still play it as a one of in Lux decks. There's certain decks that use it. It's just not, oh, oops, I win the game, because you can't just like throw it on a card.
Yeah,
you have to like actually plan it around how your opponent's playing.
Like I've had some games where a person would throw it on like a Garen, and that would be over, because Garen would just survive and strike, and he'd get 3 attacks every turn with Rally. Like
exactly right.
Like there's just not much you can do. But I feel
Atrocity, like okay, go ahead.
No, but I feel like in some of these decks, like that don't really rely on combat damage to kind of control the board. Like Unyielding Spirit was great, but it wasn't like the end all be all, if that makes sense. Like,
oh, for sure.
Like we've seen when I'm looking at the chart right now, and like Ez sees so much play right now because he doesn't rely on combat to finish the opponent. And I think that also leads into our Noxus discussion as well, which is indirect combat damage is insane for this game. Like it's a huge problem, and potentially, I hate to say it might be a Runeterra ender. I don't know. What do you think?
Be a Runeterra ender. I do think that one of the major issues with the game in terms of non-combat damage is that you can't gain life above 20 life. If you could gain life above 20, then Atrocity, you wouldn't have these They Who Endure Atrocity combos. I mean, they obviously nerfed They Who Endure as a result.
I mean, that might just be a programming thing.
Or they Who Betray. I can't remember. I'm getting my Eldrazi names mixed up with the Runeterra names because they have very similar names. But the one that's like Overwhelmed, that gets +1/+1 for every creature who dies. In the
game. It's called oh my god.
I thought it was They Who Endure.
He Who should. We'll just. Oh, hold on. I found it. It's They Who Endure. But yeah, it's very similar to the Magic names of like It Who Betrays and.
Exactly. So that's what I called it for It Who Betrays. And I was like, that's not the right. That's no Eldrazi.
Which is funny because It That Betrays sees tons of play in Magic, especially for Commander, because you literally just see that card all the time. So it would make sense to like have those two game-ending cards be so synonymous with each other, in terms of just the whole Eldritch Abomination, the Cthulhu, he who sleeps or he who dreams,
Well, my point was, like, you could have a lifesteal deck. You could have a deck that was built around gaining a bunch of life and end up having something like 35 life. And your opponent drops a 14/14 They Who Endure. It doesn't matter because they're going to hit you for 14. The Atrocity still puts you to 7. I mean, you're not, but the fact that you can't gain life past 20, I mean, that's where you get things like Swain's Ship. I can't remember its name, but the one that doubles all damage. You mix that with Ledros, and it's an instant kill. And they can't gain life in response. They can't do anything because it's they could deny it, but they can't gain life because it's just instant 20 damage at one time.
Yeah, but at that point, like, I feel like your game should be over if you're playing Commander, Ledros, and the ship. Like these online card games, their main focus, and it's something I've noticed is also a trend. They try to end the game as soon as possible, or make sure that you can't stall these games out to 50 minutes, because people don't want to surrender unless they feel like it's their choice. Like if I know personally for me, like, and this is actually something. Two Best Friends, which is another podcast I follow, brought up with Pat, who's been recently playing it, and he's actually brand new to the game. But something he brought up recently was he has yet to have a game where somebody actually ended it with somebody hitting 0. Like all his games so far have been, I'm going to surrender before I know you're just going to auto win.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is a good mechanic in terms of the game, is that you can do that. But I mean, you don't want to end up with stuff like I can't remember what it's called in Magic, but the modern deck that's like you just gain infinite life. Soul Sisters.
Soul Sisters, yeah. There've been a
Yeah,
couple others, but Soul Sisters is the most famous one because it's
yeah.
also,
You don't want to have like a
I believe it's actually the cheapest modern deck, or at least was for a long time. Like you could just build it for like $20.
yeah, exactly, and especially because it's mono white. But if you had that in this game, then people would try to stall out the Soul Sisters player until turn 40 because turn 40 automatically draws in this game, and it would just be ugly. So there is a balance, but I do think that and I understand that they're trying to future proof. They don't want to have to worry about it in 3 years, whether they have too much life steal or where it maybe creates an infinite combo somehow.
Well, it'll be
Um,
interesting to see what they do with the next set, especially because we've already had to see them change plunder into nab. So I'm kind of interested to see if we're going to have a similar kind of effect with whatever the new faction gives us. Because all the champions that, from what I've would have been leaked and such, are not really aggressive champions. So that makes sense. They're all very lovey-dovey and passive and ancient champions. Unlike Noxus and Bilgewater, which are all aggressive. Yar, we're gonna take and steal and kill and plunder and maim and all that jazz.
we have to remember that we're still going to get an additional champion for each of the original things. You just don't know whether it's going to be, on that set release, or obviously Riot's doing the thing now where they're having August is going to have the main set release, but then they have 2 mini sets that come out in like October and December in the middle of the 6-month waiting period between major sets. So you could end up seeing it where, I'm just speculating. Obviously, I have no inside information, but the new region comes out in August, but you actually don't have like the new champions for. You maybe have like Demacia, Ionia, Noxus come out in October, and then you have the other 3 or other 4 come out in December or something like that in the 2 mini sets.
Oh, so
And
like
then
a rotating faction thing where it's like, okay, we get it. This faction is weak. Here's the set of cards because it needs it. Like they could kind of mix it up just from
well,
looking
they can
at
do
like
that too, yeah.
data.
But I was more saying that because eventually you're gonna get to the problem where if you do this every set where we started with 4 champions for every region, and then when Bilgewater came out, we had 5 Bilgewater and 1 additional for each one. But if you do this every time, okay, so the next set comes out in August, you'd have to have 6 from that region and 1 from every previous region to keep it balanced. Whereas otherwise you could have, say, just 5 of the new set, and then when the mini set comes out, you have 1 from 4 different regions, and the next mini set 1 from the other 4 regions, and then you end up having 6 champions from each region, but you're not all having it introduced at once. You see, and then
Yeah,
you're not going into 7 and 8 in future sets as a result.
which is smart. Um, just to continue our train a
Mhm.
little bit here. Uh, some people have wanted me to apparently bring up thoughts about Heimerdinger and Vi and all that jazz. What do you think? Because that deck seems to be pretty consistent.
So going into the big patch that was 2.5 weeks ago, it was Heimer Vi was by far the best deck. I mean, there wasn't. And Elusive was kind of close, but Heimer Vi was just strictly the best deck if you knew how to play it. Hardest deck in the game to play, but strictly the best deck. I was really worried because they didn't hit it at all in the patches that it would continue to dominate. But actually, it's kind of fallen down. It's been about a tier 2-ish deck right now. I will say Heimerdinger, they are reworking him completely. So the deck
Oh,
will be
so,
completely different
so this I
very
don't
soon.
know actually. How are they reworking him?
They're changing his uh what are the turrets, I think they're called. They're changing his turrets around, so they're going to have different ones be different numbers. The main problem with Heimerdinger is that the 3 turret is elusive. So if you make the 3 turret literally any other turret, it automatically nerfs Heimerdinger because you can't just flash a Brilliance a billion times, get a bunch of elusive units. Also, almost everything that protects Heimerdinger is 3 mana except for the Lifesteal Barrier card. So those all make 3/1 elusives. And so you ended up with Heimerdinger having these 2-turn kills or one, or even sometimes 1-turn kills. where you make like a 3/1 elusive and then give it +3/+0 with the card, which makes another 3/1 elusive. You know, it just gets disgusting.
Um,
And
no, no.
but I was just gonna say, so they're reworking. That's how they said they were reworking, is they're looking into the turrets. Now I don't know if that they may change their mind, but they said with the next big patch notes that those are the two big things they're working on is Heimerdinger and cheap Noxus units. And what I'm assuming is going to get hit for the cheap Noxus unit.
Oh, we all know what's going to get
the
hit.
2/3 aristocrat.
I think the world knows which card is going to get hit. It's that stupid 2/3 that deals 2 when it takes damage.
Yeah, because you just have too much now. You have like the mechanic that deals 1 damage to something to deal 2 to your opponent. So with it, it's like 4 damage, and then you have transfusion. You've always had that. You now have Noxian Fervor, so if you combine it with Freljord and give it a bigger buff with Omen Hawk or whatever, you have Noxian Fervor that now deals 5, in addition to the 3/1 that when it dies deals 2 to the opponent. The Legion Grenadier.
It seems like and I don't think this is actually a product of Noxus per se, like specifically, because the Noxus cards themselves are actually pretty like interesting on their own. I think it's the fact that because of how faction splitting works, Noxus with anything else becomes like stupid good. Like I almost wish there was kind of like a small bonus to playing single faction, just to prevent these like multi-faction combo decks where Noxus plus something is busted, or I guess in this case, I hate to say it, what is it called? Oh my goodness, the place that Karma is from, Ionia. Ionia plus anything else is busted. Like,
the problem here is that to a degree you already have that, right? Because the elusive decks use Allegiance and the Noxus decks use Allegiance. The Noxus decks only go into Shadow Isles for harrowing almost exclusively. And sometimes they run an Atrocity or something like that, or 2 Atrocity. But for the most part, they only go in for harrowing, and they just use the Allegiance card. And the Allegiances were supposed, with the exception of Yordle Grifter, because he's just good on his own, they're supposed to encourage that kind of single region play. And
it's not working. It's not working.
The problem is it doesn't encourage it. It only makes it when a region is overpowered, that region becomes even more overpowered. It doesn't actually encourage people to play the Allegiance when the region's not overpowered.
So like the... Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the Shadow Isles deck, when that was dominating, it was because Shadow Isles as a whole was so disgusting that, okay, now you can play the thing that makes Mist Wraiths, because it's so good on its own, but because Shadow Isles is so good on its own, you can actually make a deck that's almost 40. And the reason that the Freljord and the Noxus Allegiance card in the past were never really played is because it's very hard to make a single deck out of those things. I mean, the Freljord Allegiance card is disgusting. It gives something +3/+3 and overwhelm on the top of your deck, and you can just win games off of it.
Well, that's why they fixed Nab and Plunder, because people were complaining about it.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Plunder is it actually hasn't been affected that much. So when it came out, obviously it came from the top of the deck, but yeah, Freljord was super weakened, and they had to change it just to make it so Freljord wasn't terrible. Because you couldn't play cards that made Yetis because they got stolen by your opponent. You couldn't play Omen Hawk because it got stolen by your opponent. People still had to play Omen Hawk.
Which is funny, because Freljord in Expedition is fantastic. Like, I feel like Shadow Isles and Freljord are 2 very good factions within Expeditions if you get the right cards. Like, or even if you don't, like, you could easily mix them and still feel like you could reasonably do decently well, you know? Whereas if I'm playing,
pretty balanced.
Yeah. Whereas if I'm playing like Demacia, if I don't get certain Demacia cards, I've already lost.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
Especially the like, if a card dies, you gain it gets life and toughness. Like I wish more cards had life gain or life link abilities attached to them, just to prevent or help a little bit with the meta, if that makes sense. Like, I would like to see more cards with like elusive life, or something where it's like elusive but only on defense, you know?
Yeah, it is very difficult right now to play a deck that doesn't have either Ionia, Demacia, or Freljord. And the main reason is that Freljord can frostbite, and then the other two have major lifesteal. So Demacia has the Paladin, the 5/5 Paladin, and then Ionia has a ton of cards. It has the 1 mana, gain 3 life for.
It almost feels like Bilgewater has kind of been put on the scene as like a big wet fart. Like they're not the stars of their own like expansion. Like don't get me wrong, you have Ezreal Twisted Fate, you have Scouts, you have this cool Tempo Sejuani deck. But like if you look at all the current like S tier Masters decks, none of them are playing Bilgewater.
I know Elusive stays in the top tier. But you're right. I'm looking at Swim's current thing, and Bilgewater really is just kind of the tier 2 meta, right? So, like, he has the Maokai Nautilus deck. I actually think that's tier 1, even though he has it listed as tier 2. That's probably your best Bilgewater deck. Scouts is really good, but that's still a tier 2 deck.
Sea Monsters gives me a headache. Like, that deck as a whole is just... If your opponent gets his right hand, you've already lost. Like there
are decks that have positive matchups against it.
Yeah, but
but if you're not playing one of those, yeah, then they can just RNG you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been on I've even played games against friends where it's like I have my entire hand is nothing but 6 or 7 costs, and it's I just surrender on turn 1. Or I'm playing against some rando who I don't really care about. It's like maybe for a quest, and it's cool, you get all your 1s, 2s, and 3s, and you've already won.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to beat aggro in the current meta. I mean, if you look at Swim's stuff, 3 of the top 4 are all aggro, right? You have 2 different elusive decks and the Noxus Allegiance deck, and they're all aggro. So if you don't have life gain, or you don't have very, very cheap ways to deal with units, like Scouts has Fleet Feather Tracker and Misfortune to start killing like 1-bite units without losing any of your attackers, stuff like that.
Misfortune is amazing. Like, it's funny, all the Bilgewater champions are so interesting and fun, except for Fizz.
Fizz has his own combo deck, and it's really, really annoying when it works, and then it just doesn't. It's not very consistent.
Going back to my original wet fart comment with Fizz.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Like, it's the same thing. They're with Fortune. Like, she comes on the board, she's great, but she's like, cool, 3 damage, you're done. What's his name? Twisted Fate. Any Mystic Shot or 2 damage, he's done. Good game. Fizz, you get your combo off, but if you don't, he just sits there and kind of hopes you don't deal anything to him with 1 health.
Well, he does counter anything that targets. So there and something that's a mistake a lot of new players make it rain targets. I know it looks like it doesn't target, but it very much targets.
Do
not play make it rain versus.
I learned that the hard way when a guy got all his quests off for Ezreal by playing 2 Make It Rains, and I surrendered.
Yeah, it's like 2 Make It Rain, 6 targets for Ezreal, and you're like, what? Where did this come from?
Yeah, it was a little jarring, I hate to say, because I was like, oh, that's a thing.
But like Fizz auto loses to what's the 5 mana Shadow Isle card that does 1 damage to everything? Whispering Whale or something?
Yeah, Whispering something. I know which one you're talking about, but yeah, the one that gives you 3 health as well.
Yeah, and so that just kills Fizz because it doesn't target. And but the Freljord combo deck with him is hilarious because you just end up having these Fizzes that from the Seer that just get buffed from all the non creature spells you're playing, and then Fizz comes out and he's like a 10/9. And you're like, okay, well, play a stupid spell, give him a buff, hit you for 12, pass. It's like you can't remove him because there's nothing that's like Ruination is your only option because everything else targets that would actually deal with him.
Yeah, any answer you had is just like it's invalid at that point.
Exactly, and they have Entreat in that actually region combo, so you can just play 3 of the Seer and 3 of Fizz, and that's it.
Oh my
And
god,
then
this the stupid
you just
drain
draw it
seer
out.
has ruined so many games for me. Just plop him down and I can't get rid of him, and they just keep
Which
playing
card?
stuff. The one where if a card dies, it drains one from you and you gain one.
Oh, yeah, the 2/4. Yeah, the 5 mana 2/4.
Yeah,
That card's really good.
it's so good. It's what is it? It's that old Magic card from back in the days when Mirrodin was the most hated like set for a while. It was that stupid you would play Arcbound Ravager and it was that combo.
Yeah, that card's disgusting too.
Yeah, like any sort of like deal you one and give you one life. I feel like in most games, especially if it's consistent, is brutal. We saw it with Underworld Dreams. We saw it with, like I said, the Arcbound Ravager Mirrodin deck from the old standard. Like it's not that they're OP by themselves or that they're not like stupid good like you said like Treasure Cruise. It's more that it feels like they're miserable to play against. Like I just don't want to play a game that's like ping you one, 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 and you're dead. And over a long period of time too, not like immediately where it's a combo and you scoop and you're like, okay, cool, that was a cool combo. It's like, no, it's a long drawn out process.
Yeah, that when they tried to make Vlad better and they gave him Drain, that's exactly why. Because Drain is just so much more powerful than simply just doing damage to your opponent. And unfortunately, even with that, Vlad's very hard to actually make good. He's in a region that wants to be very attacky, and he wants you to not attack. Like
it's kind of a weird opposite. Like I almost feel like Vlad is the kind of character where his own faction doesn't really use him well, but will probably get something later on that like kind of makes Vlad his own deck. Like he almost feels like a setup hero, like a hero that could get cards in a future expansion to make him more interesting.
Almost like a splash for a Freljord Allegiance deck, where you just have this like really good Freljord Allegiance, where you have all these buffs with Omenhawk and Seer and the 1 mana +0/+2 and whatever, and then you just have Vlad to play when he's leveled, and it's just like a bonus.
Yeah,
he doesn't really, yeah, as you said, he doesn't do much with his own region, so a lot of times it feels like you're just killing a region to put Vlad in, because you're locked at 2 regions. So once you just lock into Noxus and you're barely playing any Noxus, it's
so let's talk about the mustache in the room. What do we think about Braum and his change?
I actually love the change. Okay, so when I put out my thoughts on Twitter about the patch notes, the big patch notes, 2.5 weeks ago, I was mostly complaining. However, at the very end, I said that I was very excited about Braum because I felt that was the one big change that mattered. Anivia didn't really get change in playability. She's good because Braum is good. Braum having an attack in an innate attack value means you no longer have to set up combos with him. You just put him down and you just start killing things. And also, he makes a 3/3 every time he's played, except in very, very rare situations. So you always get a 2-for-1 on your opponent. You always, sometimes a 3-for-1 on your opponent, where you're playing Braum killing something, and then they kill Braum. So they have to use a card to kill Braum. They have something die, and you make a 3/3. It's great. I absolutely love Braum.
It's
and obviously
funny
he made a deck tier 1, right?
Yeah,
Braum
no,
and
he's
Nivea
actually he is. If I'm looking at the deck right now, I believe he became S tier because you're playing Braum and Nivea, like you mentioned previously, and then you're comboing it with Avalanche and Fury of the North and Rekindler just to get that multiple Nivea or that Braum's that you kind of need to. It almost feels like a wait to get the advantage and then just swarm the board. And like you said, it feels very anti-aggro as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're running Avalanche, you're running Whispering Whale, you're running Grasp the Undying. I mean, you just have so much life gain in the deck. And they're also running the 3/3 Kindly Tavern Keeper that heals you 3. So they're running so much life gain in the deck itself. And then Anivia kills everything on the board, basically, that aggro plays.
It reminds me of the old Karma Stall life gain deck, where like you literally just play everything that gives you life or can potentially gain you life until you put Karma on the board, and then it's over.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a Karma Dust to Dawn decks, there's Karma Ezreal decks, and Ezreal Lux decks. They do the same thing too. You're just trying to gain as much life as you can. You get to the end game, and then there's a combo. Like Ezreal Karma together is a combo. Karma Dust and Dawn is a combo. Even Ezreal Lux is a combo.
So, do you know any League lore or anything like that at all?
Oh, I've read up a lot of lore specifically because of Runeterra. Before I played Runeterra, I didn't know anything at all. But I've watched every YouTube video that they posted for all their champions. So I've seen all the videos, and I've read lore on Ezreal. I've read lore on Katarina's sister. I forget her name. And Katarina herself. Darius, Lux.
Now there you go. There's the eternal
Lux
debate. Is it Darius or Darius? I think it's Darius.
I think it's actually Darius. I should say Darius.
it's tomato all over again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's at least I say Silas correctly, right? But
oh God, I didn't play for and I mentioned this in the stream earlier. I didn't play for quite a while just because I wanted to take a break and play other stuff. And the number of champions that came out with like funky names or like weird setups or even design was just like, is this League or is this like Hot Guys and Hot Girls the MOBA game with a sprinkle of maybe a little bit of monsters.
Champions now.
Sorry, say that again.
I've heard there's like 120 champions now. I don't know if that's correct,
I believe 120 champions was the Dota mark because that was how many Dota had. I think League now has that many. I can look this up really quickly. But the reason I mentioned that question is because are there
148?
Oh, well, there you go. 148 champions, which is, when you think about it, like a lot of characters and abilities people have to memorize just to kind of get in it.
For 5 rolls.
Oh, yeah.
And 30 roll.
And they, again, referring to my original question, now that you kind of know your champions and you know your lore, are there any characters that you kind of desperately want to see that haven't been put into the game yet, at least from what we have from our current factions? Like for me, I'm really excited for Shurima, which is the desert faction, but at the same time, I know that I'm not going to get it for a while. So I kind of have to look at other champions that I'm very excited to see. Like, I know they're bringing Gangplank in the next, not Gangplank, sorry. Graves. Sorry, Graves is in the next expansion, and I'm very excited to see what he does and how he works, because his lore is fantastic. Are there any champions like that you're really excited about?
Well, I would really like to see Silas in a Demacia expansion at any point in time. I also would really like to see gosh, I can never remember his name, even though he's really Urgot. There you go. The guy Caitlyn and Vi go against.
Describe the abomination that you want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you everything about the character, and then I was like, I can't remember his name. Yeah, Urgot. I mean, I really want to see Urgot for Piltover and Zon.
Steph, be honest. Yeah. Be honest. Do you have an Urgot body pillow?
Do you have an Urgot body pillow?
Do you have a secret Urgot thing that I'm not aware of? Because you instantly pulled that up as like the big two, and now I'm like, oh.
Well, okay, so Silas and Lux's story is my favorite story. But that's not like a relationship thing. So Silas and Lux.
Okay. So it's not like the two characters is like a thing. You just like the overall like design, the whole.
I like the story. Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the Warriors video from League, right?
Yes, of course, it's amazing.
Yeah, so Silas, like in that well, I mean, Silas and Urgot are in that, but it's they're both the stories that they're currently in right now. I just find very fascinating.
Yeah,
obviously, I mean, I'm more of a fan of Vi and Caitlyn. Oh, Caitlyn's not in the game. Caitlyn would be my number one from.
Caitlyn is Piltover, if I remember correctly.
Yes, she's theoretically, people think that she and Vi are dating, and nobody actually has any idea.
Oh,
but, she's the sheriff.
We're gonna leave the shipping nonsense out of this discussion because if we want to go like massive League of Legends shipping, I'm gonna have to tell you about my 148-page fan fiction of Cho'Gath Lux and that's not just going to be pretty for anybody.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to make Ezreal jealous either. So.
Oh God! Oh no! I love the I love the dissection that has emerged out of the Ezreal Lux shipping fan fiction of just like, oh, but he says this in League, but he says this in Runeterra, and it's
yeah,
like,
I really
guys,
like when he meets her and he's like, "Oh hi, hey, ho, hey," and she's like, "Who are you again?"
it almost feels like they're trying to get rid of the ship just for the sake of like making sure the fans shut up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, guys,
well, I mean,
guys,
it's obvious that Ezreal's into her, but she has no idea who he is.
Guys, here's Ari. Get distracted by Fox stuff. Don't talk about this.
Yeah. Anyways, but Caitlyn, yeah, she's the sheriff and advised her deputy. So she'd probably make the most sense to come into the game, especially with the Netflix show coming out.
Which,
features Caitlyn
by the way,
things.
did get delayed. So they already said that we would. They put out, I think, a thing a week ago where it's like, guys, we get it, Corona, so on and so forth. We would really like to show you this, but it's going to take us some time to get it off the ground just because, we can't do it right now.
All our animators doing it, can you imagine?
That'd be really hard. I feel like it'd be different for an animation studio because animations actually don't really require that much personal contact when it comes to animating. Like, you can easily work outside of it, but when you look at stuff like voice acting, doing directive or creative storyboarding, it can get really difficult, and I think it also erodes the quality pretty significantly as well.
Oh yeah, and considering this is Riot's first venture into kind of storytelling from a animated point of view or any kind of visual point of view, I think it's very important to get it right the first time so that they can build off of it to build other stories.
Well, God knows that any sort of video game media other than the video game has been very dubious, for the longest period.
For sure.
It's not been great. Video game movies and video game shows have not done well over these past couple of years, but we have started
outside of Detective Pikachu.
Yeah, well, no. So
Sonic?
that was me going into my point, which is Detective Pikachu, Sonic, and even The Witcher are excellent examples of how if you had told me a video game movie was coming out maybe like a year ago, I would have been like, no. But now with those examples, we can see that video game movies can do really well. Sonic sold super well. Witcher was a phenomenon. Detective Pikachu made a shit ton of money. And if you
I think
told
The Last
me...
of Us is coming out with a movie too, a live-action movie.
Sorry, say that again?
The Last of Us, I'm pretty sure, is coming out with a live-action movie now.
I think they tried and just couldn't get it off, and right now
I think they announced it like a week ago.
Well, we'll see with the whole Last of Us 2 controversy.
Yeah, I know.
I don't even.
We won't get into that.
Yeah, I believe me. After reading everything that's been going on and seeing actual YouTubers get banned for talking about Last of Us 2, it's a dynamite pile just waiting to happen.
For sure, yeah. But what is your favorite part about the current Runeterra meta?
Oh, just right now,
yeah.
Oh, well, I guess you're asking me the questions now.
Well, I figured I'd just ask you one.
No, I appreciate
That's okay.
that. You know what? We'll do 2 more questions and then we'll actually play a game or two, just because we got a full hour to go now. And fine. I could probably continue talking, but I guess pertaining to your question, what's my favorite? I guess what I really like about the Runeterra meta, or I guess what I feel like for the Runeterra meta, is kind of what you were talking about earlier, which is the Runeterra meta yes, it's frustrating. Yes, the decks are very meta decky, but it kind of is but at the same time, I feel like it's almost an evolution of itself. You see it happen all the time with these online card games. You cannot avoid net decking. You cannot avoid this rock, paper, scissors style of gameplay. It's just impossible. And you can introduce stuff like, you can introduce the ARAM stuff, you can introduce the gauntlets and expeditions and such to, keep the players interested. But at some point, if a player wants to just play a quick game, he is going to run into a meta deck 4 times out of 5. Not everybody's going to be playing something weird and funky or just thrown together. And I think just from my own deck lists or looking at what I'm even playing, I'm a weird example of a regular player because I almost never play the same deck twice. I find it boring. And I said the same thing on my stream earlier with League, which is uh, I like to mix up my champions. Yes, I have certain preferences over others, but only because there's a big difference between casual and unplayable. A good example would be in League of Legends right now, or I guess previously before the patch, characters like Kog'Maw were completely unplayable. Like, not even to the point of casual. If you played him, you basically told your team, hey, guess what? We're going to lose. And I think in Runeterra, right now, there's definitely some champions where if you're playing them, you're going to lose. And it's funny because you brought up earlier. I brought up earlier characters like Fizz, and you said no, Fizz is decent and interesting, and there's a deck on him.
One deck.
But that's the thing.
Yeah.
There's one deck. If you brought Fizz and you're not playing that one deck, that's still not a guaranteed win. That's still maybe like a 50-50 chance. You're not playing the meta. You're playing like a tier 4 deck, and that might as well be the bottom tier. Yes, he's fun to play, but fun only gets you so far when you're playing, versus a stranger online versus maybe a friend who's like, oh, cool, you're playing Fizz. That's neat. Let me, adjust my playstyle a little bit, or maybe just to see what Fizz does. No, your opponent wants to win.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've run into my own games too, where I'll be playing the non-optimal route just to complete a quest because I want to get all the champions. That's kind of a goal for me right now. Without buying them, I just want to, I don't want to waste, I don't want to pay $5 for all the champions. I want to earn them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Oh man, I went on a tangent there. I kind of blanked out for a sec. No, but I guess getting to my original point, like, for me personally, in terms of the meta, I think it's fine. I wish it could be better, like you said. And competitive does bleed into casual pretty heavily. But I think as somebody who's just playing the game and having fun with it and kind of using it as a distraction, it does the job. Like, it's essentially a fancy phone game. And it's a good fancy phone game.
Yeah, I'm glad they added the phone support. For sure. And,
well, it's something that Hearthstone didn't have on release and desperately needed, like, badly.
Can you use it on tablets? You could use it on iPad, right?
I think with the new tech, yes. I think with the new tech, it's just all one big system now, so it doesn't even matter. And
no, I remember Runeterra, but.
To be honest, I haven't checked, nor do I really care because I don't use a tablet.
Well, I mean, the reason I mention it is I see a lot of people playing stuff on tablets on, say, airplanes or, well, this obviously pre-COVID, but airplanes with Hearthstone and card stores, stuff like that. They just set up their tablet and they're just playing Hearthstone forever.
I flew on the plane during COVID, actually. It was not that bad. I expected it to be a lot worse, but they're really taking it very seriously. All the airports are taking it much more seriously than I think they were previously. Like, they're doing the thing where they're opening up the lanes. They're doing the thing where it's like, no, you have to wear the mask the entire flight. And yes, it's annoying, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad they're enforcing it on everybody, if that makes sense. Sure. And the whole COVID thing has obviously been a mess, but at least it lets me play more Runeterra.
That's fair, yeah. I mean, I've definitely had a lot of downtime with my job still being
like, God knows I'd be at an F&M playing Magic if I didn't think I would die.
Yeah, I mean, that's really helped digital card games in general, like Runeterra.
Yeah, like and I think it's kind of made this whole video game industry explode in general too. Like, I think Steam put out their numbers and it was like triple or double their like usual numbers comparatively because everybody's just online on Steam or on Discord playing.
Yeah, no one's working.
And it even got mentioned in the Rainbow Six Siege community where the influx of players, now known as like the COVID newbies, have caused this like weird power vacuum of like people intentionally smurfing just so they can play those new bad players. And it happens whenever a game becomes like free to play for a weekend. Everybody jumps on, not because it's free, but because they want to beat newer players.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure League has the same problem too.
Well, Runeterra has a little bit of that right now with whenever a new expansion comes out. Like the experienced pro streamers know exactly kind of what's good and what's great instantly and aren't sharing their codes. Whereas a player like me is kind of just trying to figure out what a card even does. Like you mentioned the Ezreal Bilgewater thing. Like that's something I would have never have known. Like
Oh
or
yeah,
would have been amazed if somebody had mentioned that on stream, you know?
the Make It Rain. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the card just like single-handedly makes Ezreal so much better because it just helps
I mean,
the
it's
environments
such
and
a I feel like every card kind of every faction kind of has their staple right now, and Make It Rain is such a staple for Bilgewater, like in
Mhm.
general.
I don't. Bilgewater doesn't have any cards that's like an auto include in any deck that you play Bilgewater, but Make It Rain is probably one of the closest ones to being an auto include because
Well,
now it's not
I
a three
remember
of, it's a,
it used to be the double plunder card, and now I know people are not playing it as much as they used to.
well, like Scouts never played that, and the Sea Monsters deck never played that, but they sometimes play Make It Rain, right?
Hmm.
And that's more what I meant. Like it doesn't matter what Bilgewater deck you're playing, Make It Rain actually can fit into almost any of them. So I agree with you that that is probably the most kind of staple card for the region as a whole.
Well,
Just kind of
it's
like Mystic Shot is for
yeah, like
Pil-
it would be what is it? So it's Mystic Shot for Piltover's on.
Will of
It's
Ionia.
it's will. Oh, really? You're gonna put Will of Iona over Deny or any other?
Will of Ionia goes in every Ionia deck, but Deny does not go into the elusive aggro decks because
What
it's
about
like
Shadow Isles? Would it be Glimpse from Beyond?
oh god, Shadow House has like 30 cards, but because Glimpse to Beyond doesn't go in the doesn't always go in like the Sea
Yeah,
Monster
but
deck,
it doesn't
right?
have to be 100%. It just needs to be 90%. You know?
I would honestly say that the Shadow Isles card is probably Grasp of the Undying. There's
Really?
no meta where Grasp of the Undying is not playable. There are
The
metas where Whispering Whales is not because of Ranger's Resolve. I mean, Ranger's Resolve is a 1 mana counter target Whispering Whale. It's
I
just
was honestly amazed when that card came out because we already had Chainmail. So I was like,
oh yeah.
why would you ever play Chainmail ever if you have
Well, it's
Rangers
permanent.
Resolved?
It's permanent, and a lot of the times, to be fair, a lot of the times in Demacia decks, you're still only having 1 or 2 creatures on the board. A lot of times when you're playing Ranger's Resolve, you're saving 1 creature. However, there are some odd cases. So, like, obviously, Whispering Whale is just a hard counter. Make It Rain, it's a hard counter. Um, but it depends on the meta. I've seen people play Chainmail with, like, Fiora decks because you're mainly just trying to go all in with Fiora. And so it permanently gets her tough and makes Piltover decks basically just die because it's so hard to kill her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Rangers Resolve with the Scout decks because they go so wide. Rangers Resolve can just annihilate a lot of stuff, like the 4 mana Piltover card that does 1 damage to 2 different things, and you draw a card. I
Oh,
mean,
the card with the little lightning bolt. I can't remember.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that card is insane.
that card's really good. But then Ezreal plays it, and you're like, cool, you get 2 targets, but you don't actually do anything. You pay 4 mana. You pay 4 mana to draw a card and move towards leveling Ezreal. So
Yeah,
there's
but
like
it's the magic equivalence of like if this card draws me a card or replaces itself, it's instantly good, you know?
yeah, but I meant more like Rangers Resolve works in a tempo deck that goes wide, like Scouts. But in a deck that is more likely to have like a single card on the field or like only 2 cards on the field, it's typically better to play Chainmail or even the +1/+1 card because that can get around Culling Strike sometimes.
So
Um,
I almost feel like
Go
you're
ahead.
arguing against yourself here. Give me an example of a
Why?
deck that would play Chainmail over Rangers Resolve.
Fiora.
I
That's
thought
what I was saying
Fiora
earlier.
plays Rangers Resolve.
It plays Chainmail
Oh, it
because
okay.
yeah, because Fiora is more going around just the Fiora, right? And to be fair, they can play the Bannerman decks, but when you play Bannerman, Bannerman by himself is kind of like a Ranger's Resolve. So because he just gives +1/+1 permanently to everything other than himself. So Chainmail still helps in terms of supporting the Fiora itself. I would also say something like if it hadn't been nerfed, the standalone decks they probably would have run Chainmail because you're trying to get just one of the 4/3 now 3/3 elusive card down or get Zed down, something like that. And then it's just that one creature that you're just like buffing infinitely, and you beat everything that's not a Will of Ionia deck. So you just want that thing to have a permanent toughness.
And we're just going to take a quick sec just to give a shout out to anybody who's watching our stream currently and the discussion. If you are, let us know in chat what deck you play, or what deck at least you, or what maybe a deck you really like to play in general. It doesn't have to be meta. Is there any cards that you specifically like? Like, give us a shout out and we'll talk about it. I know for me personally, like, the deck you know what? Well, I'll open this up to you even right now, Steph. Is there a deck you specifically really like to play that's not meta? Like, for me, I love playing Twisted Ezreal. I think the combos, how it plays, is just so fascinating.
So not in terms of not meta. Well,
it can be meta, but the point is, like, it's a deck that you wouldn't play 24/7 to try to climb the ladder. It's a deck that you just like to play as a whole.
Probably Sea Monsters, actually. No, I did think Maokai Nautilus is probably good enough to actually climb the ladders. However, it has some inconsistency in the sense that you're going to have games where you draw all your Sea Monsters early, and it feels awful because you can't beat aggro. But I love playing that. Whenever I play computer games just to try to get experience for the vault, or just for a quest or whatever, a lot of times I'll try to do it with my Sea Monsters deck because it's just so fun.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas my ladder deck Scouts, Scouts is very consistent deck. It's very rare that you draw a hand that just sucks.
So you like playing Scouts because it's not that it's like the best deck, but it's that it's more consistent. It's not as like feels bad.
Yeah, if I was trying to just hard climb the ladder, I'd probably play Elusives. And I actually like Elusives. I used to play Elusives all the time in the previous pre-Bilgewater metas. I think that there's more dead draws with Elusives than there is with Scouts, because Scouts is very much like almost all of your cards are 4 or less mana. Almost all of your cards are 3 or less mana. And so unless you just draw all of your 6 mana cards at the beginning of the game, which has happened, it's just very rare. So you just very consistently have actual games. And yeah, sometimes, your matchup with Braum and Nivea, for example, is probably pretty 50-50. You're just going to have games you lose because they just have whatever they need to beat you due to RNG. But you're never going to lose because you're like, oh man, I just had a completely unplayable hand. So that's what I like playing in terms of ladder. And then when I play off ladder, it's definitely Sea Monsters because it is a little bit less inconsistent, but that deck's so much fun to play. Well, it's so much fun to put down Nautilus and then just vomit your hand out.
It's such a different deck. Like Dive in general as like a mechanic as whole is so. I almost feel like it's so left field of what Runeterra is even about, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like it's so. Whenever I see Noxus or Freljord or such, I feel like I can kind of play around it. But Sea Monsters kind of does its own thing, It's like the kid in the corner who's just enjoying himself. He's not doing anything wrong, but he knows how to have his own fun. It's his own little world.
And unless you're a deck that's specifically a late game combo deck like Ezreal Karma, you pretty much have to go under Sea Monsters. So every deck has to know how to do that, even if they're not typically like obviously Scouts, Elusives, Aggro. They're all gonna just go under because that's already what their decks are is fairly aggro. But like even control decks like the Lux control decks have to go under. They have to go under the Sea Monsters. That can be hard to do. But every deck has to know how to do it because of Sea Monsters. Because Sea Monsters basically just says when I get to like turn 8, you're just gonna lose. So have fun. You can do whatever you want in the meantime. Kill me.
And I've seen games too where like even if they don't play their Nautilus or even if they don't play their Maokai, it's such an uphill battle.
Well, the 6 mana Sea Monster that obliterates. Once you have Deep, having a 6 mana 7/7 that obliterates anything with 6 or less defense.
I forgot. Wasn't he nerfed in some way?
No, none of the Sea Monsters have been nerfed.
Okay, I feel like one of them was hit like slightly.
No, nothing from the deck was hit except for there is a 2/1 that for 1 mana that tossed 3, and now it's just a 1/1 that
Yeah,
tosses 3 for 1 mana.
not
But
the
that's
same
not a, yeah, it's
monster.
not the same monster.
They feel like I feel like with that deck they're just trying to watch its early game to make sure it can't because they know it's the entire point of the deck is late game, but I feel like uh just from even seeing that nerf, like they're trying to make sure that when it trades, it's not a favorable trade all the time.
Yeah, especially when you have a 3 mana 3/2 that has lifesteal and also tosses 3. I mean that that's the real deck that helps you get through the real card that helps you get through the early game. So having a 2/1, a lot of times it doesn't actually matter because there's very little that actually has 2 toughness for 1 mana now. They got rid of the 3/2 that can't block Legion Rearguard. It's now a 3/1.
They're getting away from bear syndrome all over again.
Exactly, yeah. So all the
And
1 mana cards have 1 toughness.
yeah.
So basically,
For those of any of our viewers or maybe people listening who don't know what bear syndrome is, or or what most people just consider the bear standard, it's the power or toughness are maybe the stats of a card equaling its cost. The famous example, of course, is the bear from Magic, which is normally a 2 power 2 toughness card for 2 mana. And that was considered the standard for quite a while. Humans were 1/1, whatever was 3/3, so on and so forth. But they got away from it the more sets came out, not really to per se balance the game, but to try to make cards a little more interesting, because otherwise they're boring. And like Steph was mentioning before, now, it feels like they're getting away from that bear standard with Runeterra, because cards are all over the map with their stat line compared to their I guess, what is it called for this game? Mana cost? Ruin cost?
just cost, I think.
Yeah, we'll just call it cost.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that was one of the big reasons, and I'm just really sad that this card got nerfed, but it's one of the big reasons Boom Crew Rookie got nerfed. And people who played in the alpha, the original alpha, it used to be a 0/4 that did 2 when it attacked, and that was really weak. And so they made it a 1/4 that did 2 when it attacked, so that it at least could like damage blockers or kill blockers.
Well, if I remember for Runeterra, 0 doesn't even count as a strike. Maybe that's the reason.
Correct. And so they well, it does the damage on attack though, so it still gets the 2 damage in. But
well, no, if I remember, because it was a big problem with Braum, his original version, is as a 0, it's oftentimes very difficult to get strike effects or work with any of his abilities. And in fact, it was really helpful against decks where if your opponent does a Nexus Strike, it doesn't count the Nexus Strike.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't count as damage or as strike anytime anything has 0 attack. But yeah,
no, but I
0
feel like that was
one of the biggest nerfs in this game. Like if you have 0 attack, it's very rare for a card to actually be playable. Prankster, the 0/3 that pings your opponent whenever something dies, was barely playable because it had 0 attack. The 0/4 that gives you I forget what they're called, a crystal every turn.
I mean, we were talking about the drain card earlier, the 5 mana 2/4 drain 1. Like, if that was a 0/4, I don't think anybody would play it.
Exactly. I mean, you have to have, even though you rarely attack with a 2/4, having it be a 2/4 is still good. You can block with it if you need to. I mean, there's like a lot of ways having attack is just beneficial in this game, and they've tried boosting cards that don't have attack. Like, as I said, 0/4 that gives you a crystal used to be 0/3. It's still not played because having a 0 attack card, there's also the 0/3 that whenever it gets damaged, it gains +2 or something, or +3 attack. That card's not played. I mean,
you need to have board presence. Board presence is so important in Runeterra.
Exactly, and like you see, Nautilus is never played early, even though it's a 0/12. He's basically almost unkillable except by Vengeance or Ruination or Will of Ionia. But you rarely see him play before you have Deep, because it's just, even putting down a 0/12, it doesn't do anything. Like, it blocks one thing, but then you just die because everything else attacks through it. Right?
He kind of just sits there, looks at you, and it's like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, at least the 13/13, you can play aggressively. You can play it down, and even if you don't have sea monsters in your hand for bad draws or whatever, you still have 13/13. Like, you still have, as you said, board presence. moments, right?
Now,
So,
here's a good question somebody just sent me.
Mhm.
Are you one of the players that plays Nautilus in Expedition and gets him every time?
No, I'm not one of those players. I actually don't play that much Expedition. I mostly help other people play Expedition. So, like, one of my friends, when he plays Expedition, I help him figure out like what cards he needs to draft, stuff like that. But I don't really play it that much myself. I prefer playing as aggro as I can in Expedition.
Is there a
If
reason you
I'm given
don't
that option.
like or often play Expedition?
Oh, I'm just a very competitive player in everything I've ever played. So I mean, that's just my personality. So I don't. I mean, I'm not saying that I always play competitive decks. Like my modern deck, my first deck was fairies, and I played that for forever. Blue black fairies.
Even for me, for someone who's casual, like I like to win, but
Exactly.
I see it. I see it often between the two differences of like open. Like actually, I hate to say it, I could probably write a whole like psychology article about this, but there's definitely a big difference between like the person who openly wants to win and the person who like wants to win but doesn't show it. And I think for me, I'm that kind of person, and you are the competitive player. Like you have to win, and it shows that you have to win. But you're not gonna. But you're not gonna. You have that personality of where you're not gonna let it sabotage your your community, your friendships if you don't win.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I was saying. Like I do play some fun decks sometimes. Like I'll play in normal mode and play that Vi-Zed deck that I didn't actually get to show you at all. But when I'm playing ladder, yeah. I mean, and what I'll say is, even though I find this meta frustrating, I can still have fun with it. I still can have fun playing scouts because there's still a lot of skill involved.
Yeah,
There was a meta early on in Bilgewater when Bilgewater came out where everything was aggro, and even if you played something that was positive, like Scouts was positive at the time, uh, you still had games where you lost and there was no skill involved because aggro was ridiculous when Bilgewater first came out.
Now,
And
if
I can't do that.
if we look
I
at
can't do orange.
if we look at the three major archetypes of all card games, or at least most of them, it's aggro, control, and combo.
Mid-range,
And
right?
we currently have those three archetypes, which is nice. We have stall decks, we have aggro decks, and we have combo decks, and each one is supposed to kind of balance the other one out, like a rock paper scissors style. But we don't really have the sub archetypes, I feel like, yet. We're kind of getting there, but maybe that's something Riot is really looking at. We don't really have prison. We don't really have ramp. We kind of do with like you said, sea monsters, but it doesn't feel that same style of ramp that most other card games have. We don't really have. Oh my god, what are some of the other ones? There's a lot of them, but the point is, we're in a, like you mentioned earlier, aggro. It's what's on the menu right now. And I would like to see Riot kind of introduce a little more control. But I don't know. Like, control is also frustrating to play against. Like, in some ways,
I think if mid range got stronger, because the closest thing to mid range right now is Scouts, and Scouts is not a mid range deck. It's not even really a tempo deck. It really is just a different version of aggro. Like, it's not hyper aggro like Noxus or Elusives, but it's just aggro. I mean, but that's our closest thing to mid range is Scouts.
well, I guess for our Hearthstone players, it'd be similar to Tempo or Zoo, like just playing a card and having it be good on the field to create a constant, steady barrage of this is good, this is good, this is good, rather than trying to achieve a specific goal of, like I said, combo or making sure opponent can't play or just trying to deal as much damage as possible.
I definitely think the mid range decks are doable. I think things like Sejuani would be is a pretty decent mid range deck, but they can't. It just everything is. There's always something better, right? There's always something better on one end of the spectrum. Like Braum and Nivea is more of a control deck, and it's just better than Sejuani Feraliwar deck. And then you could maybe have there's some Noxus decks that have
Sejuani is so frustrating.
Well, and you could also have Sejuani with the Noxus decks, and those are more mid-rangey. But then the aggro decks are almost just better. Like the Darius Shadow Isles decks are almost just better than the Noxus mid-range decks. We don't really have in the mid-range Demacia decks. I feel like are worse than Scouts. I think Bannerman's worse than Scouts. So we just haven't really had a mid-range deck since Bannerman. And I feel like having that back would really help the meta, because it does create more of a triangle. Like when you have mid-range to beat aggro, and then it helps keep aggro down in terms of play percentage. And then control obviously beats mid-range, and so you're just kind of, you're going to have a lot more balance. When you have a lot more balance, it also creates a lot more diversity as metas constantly change to adapt to whatever the most dominant part of the triangle is at the moment.
Well, if it's funny, like I said all this earlier, and you said all this earlier, but I'm looking at like the current like meta, and it's once you hit tier 1, it's all aggro and control and combo, but
Yeah.
but tempo and mid range actually make up a good chunk of tier 2. Like you mentioned, tempo Sidwani is actually pretty decent. Mid range Frostbite is not terrible. Braum Swain actually can do some
Keg Control is
decent
probably,
thing.
even though it's listed as control, it's probably a more mid-rangey deck.
Which deck?
Keg Control.
No,
I
I
don't
didn't say
know the name.
keg control. I said
Oh, I know, but I was just saying that's another example. It's listed
okay.
as controlled by Swim, but I would put it more as a mid-rangey deck, because like you're really going towards that 5 mana cards is really where you're trying to win, and 5 and 6 mana cards are where you're trying to win. That's more the mid-range.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not counting obviously Karma, because that's more combo, but the general 5-6 mana is where you have like the mid-range decks. But
Well, Runeterra I feel like has a really weird variant of mid range, and I think that actually might be, I hate to say it, its biggest benefit and its biggest problem is when you look at how mana works. Mana is probably the single most important resource for any card game, personally. I think more so than draw on anything. Once you introduce a mana system, you have to create almost like a mana economy around it, and it's so difficult to manage. And for Runeterra, having its mana economy be synonymous with its spell economy is so difficult, because giving the ability for players to play their spell cards using a separate set of mana, which they can either build around or play around, creates a really weird economy where cards that should not be played early are being played early, and combos that shouldn't really exist simply because of how turns go back and forth. Like we played in our game earlier where we were both literally just passing because we want to be able. Our decks are based around responding and seeing how much mana my opponent has left, and having any sort of spell mana or even having no spell mana means I can take advantage of this turn really easily. Like if I know my opponent. And it was probably, I think, the biggest problem with Deny previously. If I knew my opponent had 3 spell mana open and he was playing Ionia, 9 times out of 10 he had Deny in his hand. But having it before meant that if he only had a spell mana and no regular mana left, I was good to go, and I felt more confident going into other turns as well that maybe he wouldn't play Deny because he needs to create that board presence. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I agree with that. I mean, that was the one big reason that like the change was really good for the game balance, because Deny beforehand you could kind of play it in aggro in the sense that if an aggro deck developed 3 spell mana, aggro doesn't really use the spell mana for much. Well, at the time, at the beginning. And so you could just literally hold it for Deny forever, because you're just playing creatures with your regular mana, and then you just always have the 3 spell mana to hold Deny for. Now that you actually have to eat into your creature mana, aggro decks are never going to actually do that. Aggro decks would never ever use their creature mana to pay for a cancel card. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah, it's that difference between creature mana and spell mana in some ways, I think, is what makes Runeterra so fascinating. Because it changes your entire playstyle compared to other games that I've played previously, where, and even for Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh or such, my resources are very obvious and I can play around it. But for Runeterra, it feels like it's almost like the Gwent style, where you purposefully make bad plays just to throw your opponent off his game.
Yeah, and I mean, spell mana, it's very intriguing. Obviously, a lot of spells actually have to be overcosted as a result. You end up seeing stuff like Grasping and Dying, which would literally be garbage in any other card game ever, is really highly playable. As I said, it seems like the Shadow Isles featured card to me, and partly is because of spell mana. So if you bank spell mana, then all of a sudden using 5 mana really isn't that bad for a drain 3 and kill something. Or even Whispering Wail. I mean, I don't think Whispering Wail would be that great of a card if you didn't have spell mana. Having used 5 actual mana to do 1 damage to the whole opponent's board, it's kind of terrible. But when you have like a full bank spell mana and you're only actually using 2 mana to wipe your opponent's board, it feels really good. Or even 3 mana.
Now we are reaching almost that 2-hour mark, and I think we're about to hit it in 13 minutes. We mentioned earlier what champions would like to see in the game. Is there any features specifically or major changes to the game that you would personally really like to see? Like, I know for a long time people were asking for the friends list, and that we finally got it. I know for a long time people were asking for, changing the card front for the decks, so it's not just a weird random champion every time. Like, that's coming in patch 1.6. Are there any features like that that you personally feel like are not part of the game yet, but you would really like to see?
Yeah, the major thing that I want back in the game, which I don't think they're going to bring back since they removed it, but was the ability to determine who goes first when matchmaking. Because for tournament purposes, it was really nice to be able to have some, rock, paper, scissors, essentially, and then somebody be able to ban, and then the other person be able to choose when they go first, second. It creates balance. Whereas now we kind of have to, in tournaments, we have to random ban because there's no benefit to the loser of rock, paper, scissors if you had it in order, because they introduced random matchmaking in terms of who goes first. That's probably the big thing I would do in terms of the mechanics of the game. I would say that I do love aesthetic changes. I love their emojis that they print all the time. So I mean, more of that is always nice. I love the new boards with the new music, stuff like that. I obviously I spend a lot of money on the game though, as opposed to like people who are exclusively free to play. I don't really spend it on cards itself, but in terms of aesthetics and stuff. So that's my big things. I do know that, like, as I said, I'm not very. I don't like a lot of the casual modes. I don't play them that much. I did try ARAM. I haven't actually done the Gauntlet yet. I did play the Expeditions once or twice, but for the most part, I very much concentrate on the player-to-player side of
Gauntlet was missable. You could pass Gauntlet and you wouldn't care, honestly.
Okay. I mean, they have a singleton Gauntlet now, kind of like an EDH Gauntlet.
Yeah, but even then, I feel like the Gauntlets so far have kind of been like a big miss, per se, in terms of like just making the game different enough to make it interesting. Like, the Singleton Gauntlet is neat, don't get me wrong, but it still feels very meta-ish, if that makes sense. Like, I would like to see a Gauntlet where it's like both players have to play the exact same deck, or everybody just has to play Noxus. Everybody. Like, I would like to see them really go left field rather than trying to go with the safe options, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I think I would like to have things that are pretty left field too. I mean, I think it would definitely make it a lot more interesting of decks. Though, if you did have everybody has to play this one region, people would all play the Allegiance card. So then there's problems there too. I will say one other thing. Oh, go ahead.
I was about to say it would at least be different enough where I would want to play it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's going to be very, very different than Ladder, for example. What I will say though, the one big thing, if Riot, if I could say one thing to Riot, is I want more like communication. So I'm not saying their communication's horrible, but like I have no idea when they're going to start spoiling cards for the next thing, and it comes out in August. It comes out mid-August. Like, we should be having card spoilers by now.
Yeah, but they may be doing the kind of I mean, we saw this before sometimes. Like, reveals have gotten a lot more complicated because now you're trying to do combinations with streamers and people who are not like a company, if that makes sense. So I feel like and Magic has been doing this recently too. They're giving card previews away to like random YouTube channels and random Twitch streams, and I guess
or by email.
Yeah, or even by email to to random companies that don't really like support their game singly. And I
Yeah.
feel like for Runeterra, they're kind of preparing that same style with the next expansion, where so and so has 15 million viewers. He gets to show off the big champion. You know, they're trying to make it player driven.
Yeah, I guess so. I do like the videos though. I do like when they would post the videos, and they also posted on their league channel. They posted the Tales of Runeterra
Oh no, I'm
videos where
not
they have
saying
like the
they're
war
gonna like
stories.
stop doing that, or they're not gonna do it, or maybe even do less of it. What I'm saying is I think they're trying to do more player involvement, and that takes
Mhm.
time. It takes contracts. It takes you can't just send a person an image and say, "Cool, show this on your stream." You kind of have to say, "Look, here, you know, you can't. You get this a little bit early. You're gonna stream it and show it on these days. Here's an NDA. Don't sign this." All the weird company mumbo jumbo with people who normally aren't involved with stuff like that.
I mean, I agree with that. I just think that like we're coming up about the halfway point of the season on a week from Thursday, and at the end of the season, it should be when we're getting new spoilers. So it should be about 5 weeks from now. I mean, not spoilers, sorry. When the new set comes out, should be about 5 weeks from Thursday or so. And for us to not know anything, like even like a schedule or even like just some kind of like I don't even know if the set release has been set other than it's quote unquote August. It'd just be nice to know when things are going to be coming out so you can kind of be on the lookout. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't have to be they don't have to necessarily be like we're gonna have it on our YouTube channel. They could just be like, well, we're gonna have our first spoiler on July 19th, and then everyone knows to look out for it that day. And then if they don't work out the contract in time to get it done with the streamer, they could do something else spoiled on their own YouTube channel or something.
So
You see what I'm saying?
kind of like the Nintendo Live stuff that's been going on, where like
Yeah, like Nintendo Directs. Yeah.
yes, yeah, Nintendo Directs. I love the Nintendo Directs. I look forward to the Nintendo Directs. I know there's one coming out later in July, and they haven't put a date out yet, but I know they're going to pretty soon. And even if I don't see any trailers, or it's literally Sakurai or some guy in his shorts talking about Legend of Zelda, I'm going to be happy because at least I have a timetable, or at least I have something to get excited for. It's that hype train. You want that
Exactly.
hype.
It creates people talking about it, right? And that's the biggest thing. Like you don't even have to put out a spoiler. You say the first spoiler comes out in a week, and for a week you're gonna have Runeterra fanatics talking to their friends about, oh my gosh, the new spoilers are coming out this week. And
Well, you
people may not
also
necessarily know anything about the game, but they know that their friends excited about it, and then they
well,
may tune.
but you don't want to put it out too early because then people, you run into a situation kind of like right now with Overwatch 2, where so many people are excited for the new thing that they just dump the old thing, even though the old thing is still technically relevant.
The new set's coming out in 5 weeks, right? And then you want to have things spaced out. Like you want to like the last time when they did it, it was like every 3 days was a different region, and then for Bilgewater, it was spread out over an entire week, I think. And so if you had the same thing here, 3 days for every region is 3 weeks, and then an entire week for the new region would be 4 weeks to actually just do just for spoilers. And then if you said a week before what the first date of the spoiler is, that's basically right now. It's
Well,
the
now that I
5 week
even
mark. You
think
see what I'm
about it,
saying?
I think all of
So
our
I'm not saying to have like to be like, oh man, 3 weeks from now we're gonna have our first spoiler. But even just saying like, I feel like we're around the period of time where we should be having some kind of information.
I was about to say, I think if I remember correctly, I think, and I really hope I'm wrong, but I think all of our spoilers so far have been from data mining and leaks. Like the only reason we even know what faction is coming out next is not because Riot told us.
Yeah, it's data mining.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's the other issue with not having a lot of communication. Now, granted, they data mined it so early, where I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So this specific situation, it's not that big of a deal. But in general, if you don't give people something, like it doesn't have to be a spoiler, but if you don't give people some kind of idea of of a plan, people are going to try to search it out themselves because people want to know something.
Yeah,
and it does feel like we're in the dark a lot.
Blizzard's been having this issue right now with Warcraft and their new expansion. The data mining has been insane, and it's kind of created this issue where what previously would probably be a very exciting expansion has turned into kind of like a oh, okay, you know, it feels almost a little half-baked because of it. So if you're trying to go in blind, it's almost impossible. And a friend of mine actually does this now with movies, where if a trailer comes on for a movie, he closes his eyes and closes his ears and he doesn't watch it. Even if he knows the movie is coming out from like talk, like from friends and family, he's not going to watch the trailer because he feels like it preemptively ruins any excitement for him because he knows exactly what's going to happen, especially now with the newer trailers where people are dissecting them and it shows off all the movie. Like when I saw the Endgame trailer, don't get me wrong, there were still parts of Endgame I didn't see that I was like blown away by, but I at least had a really good feel of what Endgame was going to be. And I kind of pieced the plot together just from the trailers alone. But if I had seen like maybe just a picture of Endgame, or maybe just somebody say, hey, the next Avengers movie is coming out, I don't know if I would have been as excited, but at least I would have gone in like spoiler free, and I think I would have enjoyed the movie a lot more. And just from his own reactions, just from seeing movies, even if they were like quote unquote bad, and enjoying them was for him is fantastic. He loves it. I think he did the same thing for Baby Driver. He saw Baby Driver with zero spoilers, zero trailers, zero whatever. And some people loved it. Some people, think it's overblown. But he enjoyed every second of it. He was like, oh man, this movie's great. I have the DVD now. And I'm like, but it was an okay, whatever movie. But because the plot wasn't spoiled for him, he enjoyed it a lot more than other people.
Well, what they're doing now in a lot of movie trailers as a result to combat this is they're putting in a lot of fake scenes into the thing, like things that they filmed, but they're like, we're not going to put this in the movie. But it still helps to understand what the plot is without spoiling anything for the actual movie.
The most famous example of that for me was Talladega Nights. When I saw the Talladega Nights trailer, there were like 5 scenes that I was really excited for because I laughed in the trailer, and they were not in the movie. And I was like, what the fuck? That you can do this? This is a thing? This is legal?
Mm-hmm. It helps people understand the plot without spoiling anything for the actual movie. And I do like that.
Yeah, but I guess it's also harder when you have superhero or like plots that have already been done. Like it's kind of hard not to spoil Lord of the Rings if the thing has been a book for what, 40 plus 50 plus years?
Yeah, exactly.
But we are at the 2-hour mark, and Steph, thank you again for coming on. Like, this was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was great.
Honestly, we'll probably do this again, just because I hate to say it, I kind of like having a co-host. Talking to myself for 5 hours was a little rough. So if you ever want to just play a couple Runeterra matches randomly or whatever, let me know, and we'll jump in and play. It doesn't have to be on schedule either, so I'm always I'm always there to get my butt kicked. But no, I'll catch you later. And again, thank you everybody who watched my first stream. And Steph, if you'd like to take, I guess, a online imaginary bow, by all means. Just don't bump the mic.
Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah. All right. I'll catch you later. And thank you again. This has been Shoal Shepherd. I'll catch you guys later.